Are you tired of being mediocre in Minecraft? Today I'll teach you how to PvP like a pro in 1.16. Now if you're more into building or even redstone engineering, don't click off just yet. PvP in Minecraft is an important skill to develop, whether or not you're interested in being a part of the competitive PvP community. By becoming at least somewhat decent at PvP, you can more easily defend yourself in a dire situation. Now, if you want to farm roses and potatoes in your single player world on peaceful difficulty accomplishing absolutely nothing, I won't stop you. However, if you want to learn how to survive and perhaps even dominate where the big boys and girls go to play Minecraft, then be sure to watch through this video. This video will teach you everything from the basics of PvP to advanced strategic combat. We'll start off by understanding the basic combat mechanics in Java 1.16, followed by basic techniques you won't survive without, and how you can better understand your opponent. Then we'll move on to more advanced combat strategy. Lastly, but most important of all, we'll be going over how you can defeat multiple opponents at once, so be sure to stick around. Before we get onto the advanced, strategic, psychological warfare behind completely and totally crushing the morals of your opponent, we need to better understand how combat works in 1.16. The 1.9 update shifted combat more towards strategic, well-timed, and accurate hits rather than just clicking fast. This is due to the new mechanics behind critical hits and attack speed. Weapons in updates 1.9 and above now have a maximum attack speed. If you attack too quickly without letting your attack indicator recharge, you will do little to no damage. Swords have a much faster attack speed, but axes do a lot more damage per hit and can disable shields. Critical hits are very important. If you hit an opponent while falling, you'll see these particles appear and your opponent will take significantly more damage. Another very important thing to remember is that you can't land a critical hit while sprinting. This means you'll have to stop your sprint mid-air before striking an opponent in order to get a critical hit. Shields were another combat feature added in 1.9 and are useful in a combat situation. Shields negate all forms of projectile and melee damage if activated while facing the direction of the attack. However, an axe can disable another player's shield for up to 5 seconds, making that player now much more vulnerable to attack. If you do not have an axe at your disposal, you can land hits with a sword if you attack from behind, as the shield only blocks damage in the direction that the player is facing. It is also important to note that you are unable to move quickly or use a weapon while your shield is activated. Another combat mechanic you may be familiar with is the momentum reach mechanic. The mechanic has been in place since before 1.9, but is still very relevant to combat in 1.16. What is this mechanic, you may ask? Well, the mechanic makes it so that player with forwards momentum has further reach than a player moving backwards. This means that a player knocked back by another player's attack will have more difficulty retaliating due to their backwards momentum. This is probably one of the most important combat mechanics to understand, as utilizing it correctly can allow you to repeatedly land hits on your opponent without them being able to touch you. Now that you understand the basics of how combat works in versions 1.9 and up, we can begin dipping our toes into some basic combat techniques. These techniques make up the basic maneuvers that are often utilized in more advanced combat strategies. The first one we'll be talking about is strafing. Strafing is moving side to side randomly to make yourself a difficult target. However, there's more to it than that. It is essential that you try and take into account your opponent's perspective. You have to try and make your movements as unpredictable as possible. Also, strafing forwards and backwards is effective as well. It is always best to avoid attacking your opponent head-on where they have a fair chance of hitting you. Strafe around them instead. Sprint resetting is essential when it comes to doing the most knockback possible to your opponent. If you hit a player while sprinting, you do more knockback. However, each subsequent hit in a single sprint will do less knockback than the first. The simple solution is to quickly stop sprinting and then start sprinting again each time you hit an opponent. There are multiple ways to do this, but I prefer pressing and releasing the W key while holding the sprint key. This is called W tapping. This method is simple and easy to learn. The third and final basic technique is a skill that is not easily taught. Here I'm talking about accuracy. Being able to track your opponent and avoid missing attacks will give you the biggest advantage in a fight. This skill can only really be learnt through practice, but there are some things you can do to help. Firstly, you can turn down your mouse sensitivity. This will make it so that you can track your opponent a lot smoother. You will also need decent desk space for this, as lower mouse sensitivity requires more movement to turn around fully in case your opponent attacks from behind. Turning up your FOV will also make it easier to see your opponent if they are near the edge of your vision. Now let's talk about how you can better understand your opponent and their motives. This can give you an upper hand in any combat situation. Reading an opponent's body language can help you anticipate what they are about to do next and where they're about to be, allowing you to respond accordingly. First of all, we'll be talking about health advantages. This is a very crucial part of PvP in 1.16, as the fight can be determined in a matter of just a few hits. When you start a fight, assume that your opponent is at full health. This is the most crucial part of the fight, and the actions you take here will likely determine the winner and loser of the skirmish. At this point in the fight, you will want to fight defensively. Fighting defensively means trying to land hits on your opponent without taking damage yourself. Defensive fighting requires a lot more strategy and critical thinking. Your goal is to land the first set of hits on your opponent to immediately deplenish their health without allowing them to do the same. More on this later. Pay attention to the number of hits you land, as you can then estimate how much health your opponent has left. This way, you can better anticipate what they may do next. If you successfully depleted your opponent's health at the beginning of the fight without losing much of yours, then you have the health advantage. At this point, you can simply trade hits with your opponent until they die, since they have less health than you. This is offensive fighting. When you are going up against an opponent that's better geared than you, then you will want to fight defensively for most of the fight. Focus on landing hits and evading the attacks of your opponents. There are also many ways you can level the playing field when fighting a better armed opponent, many of which we'll be going over later in the video, so be sure to stick around. Now it's time for us to move on to some more advanced combat strategy. We'll be going over some basic strategic moves that can give you the upper hand in sword PvP, axe and shield PvP, and combat in the wild. In a sword duel, your objective is to get combos. A combo is when you hit your opponent repeatedly without taking damage yourself. The best way to do this is to combine strafing and sprint resetting to repeatedly knock your opponent backwards while still remaining a difficult target. If your opponent manages to hit you, your momentum will be stopped and your combo broken. Here are a few strategies I like to use to start combos. These strategies are intended for use in sword combat, though some may work well for axe and shield PvP as well. Stab in the back. A simple way to ensure you get the first hits at the beginning of a fight is to attack from the rear. You'll be able to land 2 or 3 critical hits before your opponent is able to respond. Spam clicking. Though spam clicking does barely any damage in 1.16, it can still be a very viable tactic in specific situations. Spam clicking makes it easier to hit an opponent strafing around you, allowing you to stop them in their tracks and begin to land full hits much easier. The haha you missed strategy. If you see an opponent approaching aggressively from directly in front of you, they will likely attempt to hand a critical hit first thing. Humor them by sprinting towards them, exactly what they want you to do, and when they jump into the air to go for a crit, stop suddenly and strafe back into the side. They will have anticipating where you would have been, so they will miss their critical hit and land harmlessly next to you. You can now sprint hit them with a sword, knocking them backwards, allowing you to land multiple subsequent hits. The false health disadvantage strategy. You can easily trick your opponent into thinking they have the advantage by turning and frantically running away. Then, when they least expect it, turn around, step to the side, and attack them. If you time it right, they may not be expecting you to turn around at that moment and will miss an attempted attack. The Obi-Wan strategy. Use the terrain to your advantage. Try and get the high ground, preferably on a hill with relatively steep but climbable slopes. As your opponent attempts to reach you, knock them backwards, dealing both melee damage and a bit of fall damage too. After landing a few hits, you can use your height to leap over your opponent, end up behind them, and finish them off with critical hits. You may have noticed that most of these strategies utilize an element of surprise. This is because you have the best chance of dealing significant damage to an opponent if you do so before they have time to react. These strategies are most useful in sword PvP. Let's move on to some strategies specifically for axe and shield duels. When starting an axe and shield duel, you can either choose to wait for your opponent to attack or initiate the fight yourself. If you want to bait your opponent into attacking first, face them while holding your shield, jumping up and down. Rapidly click the attack button on your mouse while doing so. This way, you'll instantly hit your opponent as they disable your shield, possibly even landing a critical hit if the timing is right. You can continue clicking rapidly after the first hit to disable your opponent's shield. At this point, you've landed the first hit and both you and your opponent's shield are disabled. However, your shield will be available slightly before your opponent's. If you want to initiate the attack yourself, you can do one of two things. You can try and attack from the side or behind to deal damage and rapidly click after the first hit to maximize your chances of disabling their shield if they try to activate it. You can also try disabling their shield from just barely within reach and then backing away. Now that your opponent's shield is disabled, you have just a few seconds to trade blows before their shield comes back up. I like jumping and strafing around them while landing crits. You can also land normal hits by strafing side to side, forwards, and backwards. Once your opponent's shield is no longer disabled, it's rinse and repeat. We're not done just yet. The previous explanations and strategies assume that you're in a kit PvP situation, and both you and your opponent are equally well geared with only the basic necessities for combat. But what if you're in a wilderness combat situation, perhaps on a survival SMP? In this case, you may encounter opponents who are better geared than you, and you may also lose your gear, making the stakes stakes the fight even higher. This kind of PvP is the most important to know even if your playstyle is not PvP oriented. You could be attacked at any moment, so why not prepare for such an event? The following strategies are very effective ways to level the playing field when fighting a better armed opponent in the wild. Splash potions are one way of leveling the playing field against a better armed opponent. Potions such as slowness, harming, and poison do damage to players regardless of the amount of armor protection they have. A splash potion of poison 2 with a 20-second duration will get your opponent's health down to near zero. A splash potion of harming 2 will lower your opponent's health by nearly half, and 2 to 3 will almost certainly kill your opponent. Slowness splash potions will not harm your opponent, but instead make them much less agile and easier to hit. Milk can remove such effects, but players wouldn't think to bring milk into combat. You can prevent your opponent from using splash potions by having a bucket of milk in your hotbar, so you can drink it to rid yourself of any harmful effects. Strength potions are also very useful as they significantly increase the amount of damage you do per hit. You can also use various types of fire damage to lower your opponent's health. Flint and steel is probably the most accessible early game, and you can click to set a block or a player on fire. Set the blocks in front of a player on fire without warning. They will either run through the fire and take damage, or notice it and stop in their tracks, giving you precious time to escape or plan an attack. Lava buckets are extremely useful as well. Lava does a lot more damage than plain old fire, and as a plus, it slows your opponent's speed significantly. If you manage to entrap your opponent in lava, they will begin taking damage quickly and will also be stuck in one place, making it easier for you to hit them. Bring water buckets or potions of fire resistance to protect yourself from lava attacks, or even from taking damage from your own lava. You can also enchant your weapons with fire aspect to deal fire damage as you exchange blows with your opponent. But what can you do if you're being attacked by several opponents at a time and are severely outnumbered? There's a few strategies that may save your life in the event you have to fend off multiple opponents yourself. The following strategies assume that you're in a wilderness combat situation and have access to all or most vanilla items. Firstly, you can use ravines to your advantage. Lead your opponent to a ravine and leap across to the other side. When they attempt to do the same, knock them back into the ravine. Even if the fall doesn't kill them, you've still bought yourself valuable time. If you find yourself facing two opponents, you can use the lava trap strategy. Pour lava on one of your opponents, leaving them trapped in place and taking severe fire damage. While they flail helplessly in the lava, take the opportunity to finish off the other opponent, or at least significantly reduce their health. Splash potions are also very effective against a group, as a single potion can affect all players within a confined area. If you notice your opponents bunched close together, take the opportunity to throw a splash potion of poison too. With only the use of a single potion, several of your opponent's health are now dwindling closer to zero. Make sure to have a milk bucket on you in case you end up within the splash radius of the potion. You can also use a potion of invisibility on the group, including yourself, to obscure everyone's name tags and cause confusion. Once again, the Obi-Wan approach is the perfect way to finish off your opponents. Take the high ground, and knock them back when they try to reach you. This will also induce some fall damage as well, a deadly combo that will lead you to victory. Well, that's a wrap. Take these strategies and spend some time practicing, and soon you'll be a PvP pro. If you found this video useful or enjoyed it for some reason, please consider subscribing. This video has been weeks in the making, including all of the scripting, practicing, recording, and collaboration with other players. Channel memberships are now a thing, so you can choose to support the channel that way and receive exclusive membership ranks on the Ro11en SMP, along with other VIP perks. Either way, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time. Stay alive out there.